Chapter 2 Disclaimer. Alex stared at the blank page, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She became aware of heavy panting behind her, and slowly turned to see Bob leaning down, staring at the screen. "What are you doing?" she asked him. "Making sure you don't put me in another thong. The bustier wasn't bad, but the butt floss." He shuddered dramatically. She raised an eyebrow. "You don't seem to have a problem when I'm the one wearing it." He shrugged. "You don't have a hairy ass. You know, I think there are some things our readers really don't need to know," she grumbled. "You don't want them to know you don't have a hairy ass. I don't care about my ass," she blinked. "And I think that's enough asses in this disclaimer. Damn it, Bob, why do you do this? I had a nice, neat disclaimer all lined up, and you just had to barge your way into it, didn't you? Well, it's one way of making sure you don't make me cross-dress again. Let me remind you that I have several more chapters of this story to disclaim, and I haven't finished this one yet," she told him, glaring dangerously. He flinched. "Actually, dear, I think you are." Turning to face the readers, he quickly muttered the magic words. "We don't own Harry Potter!" "Robert!" she bellowed, and stood up. "Oh, crap!" Spinning on his heels, he raced out of the office. Yanking open her toy chest, Alex selected a spiked bullwhip and her fear. She walked to the door, then stopped and faced the readers. "Enjoy the story, folks. And if you hear screaming in the background, it's nothing to worry about. He enjoys it, really." With a firm nod, she turned and left the office. Grim old place. The morning light shone through the window, waking Harry. Making himself awake, he sat up and stretched, feeling better than he had in a long time. Climbing out of bed, he said good morning to Hedwig and checked her water and food. Though she was hunting for herself now, he knew she liked having her dish full of food. He was convinced she felt neglected when he forgot to do so, and she tended to be more nippy than usual, and not in the cute, affectionate way she usually nipped at him. When she felt Harry wasn't doing his duty by her, she tended to draw blood, usually from his earlobes. Finished, he stripped off his clothes and went to take a shower. As he stood under the hot spray, he realized he didn't have to rush. There would be no fat cousin to drag him gleefully from the shower this morning. Half an hour later, a pink-skinned boy who lived re-entered his bedroom, a towel around his waist. Dragging clothes from his trunk, he quickly dried off and got dressed. Sitting down at the desk, he dragged the last summer assignment towards him and scowled. He had left his potions essay for last and seriously thought about not doing it. He didn't give a rat's ass about the class and didn't plan on taking it next year. But Snape, ever the asshole, had insisted that he complete the assignment, and the headmaster had agreed. Sharpening his quill, he glared down at the blank parchment and thought for a moment. Then, dipping his quill into his ink bottle, he got down to work, explaining the hazards of mixing belladonna with chocolate pudding. He wrote it all out rather painstakingly, Parseltongue. The subject had nothing to do with what Snape had actually assigned, but the greasy bastard couldn't understand, let alone read, Parseltongue, so it didn't much matter anyway. Concentrating hard on his homework, the pain caught him by surprise. His scar throbbed, but it wasn't as strong as normal. Dropping his quill, he slapped one hand over his scar and ground his teeth. "A potions essay in Parseltongue. Whatever's the boy thinking, Severus will fail him for that." Harry blinked rather owlishly as the pain lessened somewhat. He began to question his sanity as the voice in his head began to speak once more. "If the boy fails potions, it will be harder to keep an eye on him." "No matter. I will simply instruct Severus to allow the boy to continue the class." Harry's eyes widened when he realized whose thoughts he was hearing. "Great! Not only is the slimy bastard trying to kill me, now he's trying to drive me insane," he muttered, still clutching at his scar. "An insane Potter could work to my advantage." "Oh, stuff it, you lipless freak!" Harry bellowed. The voice was silent, and Harry breathed a sigh of relief. The pain was gone, so he dropped his hand and laid his head on the desk. "Potter, shut up, you wanker," Harry mumbled. "You can hear me." The voice sounded incredulous. "No, I often talk to myself. Of course I can hear you, moron. But how is this possible? Fuck if I know," Harry growled. "You're the mighty Dark Lord. You figure it out. Manners, Potter." Voldemort sounded rather testy, which made Harry grin. "Or what? You'll kill me. Or what? You'll kill me. Or what? You've been trying to do that for years now and haven't succeeded. I must think on this. Good luck with that. I hear snakes have rather small brains. Don't strain yourself too much, Harry said cheerfully. You will beg for death before I'm finished with you, Potter. Voldemort snarled. Harry frowned as thoughts, obviously not his own, flashed through his mind. Yeah, you've said that before. To be honest, you're starting to sound a bit pathetic. That muggle-loving headmaster of yours won't be able to protect you forever. Dumbledore's a fool, Tom, Harry said scathingly. I think we've finally found one point we can agree on. The voice was silent for so long. Harry thought Voldemort had pulled away. You and Dumbledore have had a falling out, the Dark Lord asked cautiously. Something like that, yeah. And yes, I know. I'm sure you're thinking you can use that to your advantage. Harry leaned back on his chair and rolled his eyes. The reply, when it came, sounded shocked. How did you know that? Harry's eyes narrowed slightly. You didn't honestly think this freakish link worked only one way, did you? You can read my thoughts. Voldemort shrieked. "Oh!" Harry exclaimed. "Not so loud!" "You didn't answer my question, Potter." "Because the answer is obvious, you idiot," he muttered. "I must think on this." "Yeah, so you've said. Mind keeping your thoughts to yourself, though. I really don't need to listen to the deranged ramblings of a Dark Lord, thank you very much," he said snidely. When Voldemort didn't reply, Harry breathed a sigh of relief. Standing, he walked to the window and stared out at the backyard, thinking over what had just taken place. He hadn't exactly lied when he'd implied he could read the Dark Lord's mind. Twice, when Voldemort was angry or shocked, he'd caught the madman's fleeting thoughts. He wasn't sure how it had happened, or if it could be of any benefit to him, as he didn't know if the link would be repeated. Harry's smile was mostly teeth. Voldemort had seemed a bit rattled, and that could only be to the good. The tables had been turned this time, and he found that he rather liked the idea of a jumpy Dark Lord. Glancing at his bed and the books he had hidden under the mattress, he realized that research was in order. Grimmauld was full of books. He might just find something to help him exploit the strange link if the opportunity arose. Hogwarts Great Hall. Afternoon. Most of the teachers had left the school for the summer holiday. Those who remained in the castle and were not members of the order had been informed that the Great Hall would be used for a private meeting and were asked to respect the privacy of those within. As this was a common occurrence over the last several years, no one raised an eyebrow over Dumbledore's request. The members of the order had already arrived and been served refreshments by the time the headmaster arrived and warded the hall against eavesdroppers and locked the doors. As he made his way to the head of the Ravenclaw table they were using for the meeting, those order members not already seated scrambled for the benches. Gazing down the length of the table, Dumbledore noted that the Weasley clan was in attendance, minus Ron, Ginny, and Percy. Of course, Dung was explaining his latest scheme to several people, many of whom looked upon him with various degrees of disgust. Few people understood why Dumbledore put up with the drunken thief, but Dumbledore found him amusing and surprisingly useful at times. Albus leaned away from the table slightly as a house elf served him tea. Once the creature moved away, he called the meeting to order. The sounds of shuffling echoed through the room, and the elves in the hall popped away. "Much has happened, and I know many of you have questions about the events of the last few days," Dumbledore began. "Headmaster, is it true that Potter's relatives locked him away this summer?" Minerva asked, her face pinched in outrage over the idea. "Aye, it's true," Moody growled from his position across from her. "And he has been removed from their care for the summer," Dumbledore soothed. "I've spoken to them about their treatment of the boy, and I'm positive it won't be repeated next year. You're going to send him back there?" Remus asked, aghast at the idea. "The blood wolves," Dumbledore began, "are not worth the abuse," the werewolf railed. Moody looked at him oddly as Remus leaned forward to glare at Dumbledore. "Harry could stay at Order headquarters next year. Surely the house is safe enough, hidden as it is." "Assuming the brat ever comes out," Snape snarled. Several people turned to glare at him. "You've always disliked him, Severus," Molly said, shaking her head. "I don't think we need a repeat of your opinions on the matter." "You saw what he'd done to me after he removed us from headquarters." The Weasley twins, sitting several spots away and on the opposite side of the table from their former potions professor, both grinned. They'd heard their mother explain to their father what had happened yesterday at headquarters and regretted not witnessing it firsthand. Not that they wanted to be chucked out of the house on their asses, but a few pictures of the glorious downfall of the arrogant prick would not have gone amiss. Not only would it have been amusing, but the blackmail potential was enormous. "Save it," Moody said, glaring at the man. "We've all heard this whine before, but you saw what he did to me," Snape complained bitterly. "And about damn time, too," Remus said fiercely. "What should he have done after putting up with years of abuse from you? He should show respect for a teacher. Respect is earned, you great greasy git," Remus bellowed, glaring dangerously at the man. "And you are the least likely person to have earned it from him. You hated him before you ever met him because of who his father was. You thought he was a pampered prince, yet when confronted with the truth of Harry's life at the Dursleys, you still couldn't admit that you were wrong. If he's not the spoiled brat I think he is, why are we holding a meeting about him?" Snape asked snidely. "Because he bested you, Death Eater," Moody growled, his eye whirling madly. "He bested all of you who were in the house. You let your guards down and got your asses handed to you." "Yeah, and some help you were with that," Tonks grumbled. Moody turned to her and raised an eyebrow. "If you don't want to be seen as a little girl playing at being an aura, you'll remember to be constantly vigilant." "Oh, for Merlin's sake, Moody," not that tired old refrain again, Tonks complained. She wasn't as calm as she sounded, however. Her hair was cycling through too many colors to name. His barb had obviously struck a sore spot. "Had you used what little intelligence you have, you would have asked me to have a peek at what was going on upstairs," Moody said. Then he looked at each individual who'd been in Gribble that day. "You all got exactly what you deserved. Your treatment of that boy has been appalling, and you're all very lucky he was as gentle with you as he was." He snapped our wands. "And they've since been replaced," Remus reminded her. "Alastor is right. Harry could have been much harsher with us than he was, and we would have deserved it. I don't think I'd go that far," Dumbledore said gently, his eyes shining. "Of course you wouldn't," Moody growled, looking at the man. Ignoring him, Dumbledore smiled. "But we are getting off track. This meeting was called to come up with ideas to remove Harry from headquarters and return the house to the Order. And how do you expect to do that? It's not as if he's going to invite us in for a cup of tea and a nice chat, Headmaster," Hestia Jones muttered. "True," Dumbledore agreed, leaning forward. "But while he's angry with us, we know he'd never hurt his friends." Arthur Weasley frowned. "You propose sending in Ron and Hermione?" Molly paled slightly and turned to face Dumbledore. "Yes," Albus confirmed. "Is that wise, Headmaster?" Snape asked. "The Granger chit might be useful, I'll grant, but that lout Weasley has a worse temper than Potter, and isn't nearly as intelligent." As the Weasley family erupted in defense of one of their own, Snape sat back and idly swirled the tea around in his cup. Whatever their strengths, the family of redheads was easily riled, and the dark man greatly enjoyed manipulating them. "Enough!" Dumbledore shouted, gaining control once again. "Ronald Weasley is a true and loyal friend. I have no doubt he would do all in his power to help Harry." Minerva scowled, but refused to rise to the bait. "Tell me, Severus, how many in your house have become Death Eaters since you became head of Slytherin?" she asked casually. Snape leaned forward and glared at her. I wouldn't finish that sentence," Minerva told him, her eyes boring into his. "Unless, of course, you wish to spend what's left of your life as a toad. He'd be the perfect mate for Umbridge," George Weasley murmured. "And a friend for Trevor," Fred added. The Weasley family broke into laughter, and Snape flushed. "Again, we have gotten off track. Ron and Hermione will be sent to headquarters with instructions to talk Harry into coming out and releasing the house to the Order. Sirius would have wanted it that way, and Harry must know that." Several Order members nodded in agreement. Remus shook his head. "Harry's right! You are an idiot!" Several people gasped, and Moody's eyes widened so far his fake one nearly popped out of his head. "What did you say?" Dumbledore asked mildly. Pushing away from the table, Remus stood up and glared down at the headmaster. "I said you're an idiot, Albus. I don't think you or the others truly realize the depths of Harry's anger towards you." "Oh, it's not as if we knew what was going on," Remus Tonks reminded him. "Once he's aware of that and has a bit of time to cool off, I'm sure he'll see that and forgive us." "Dumbledore knew," Remus told the crowd. "Didn't you, old man? There is much that could not have been avoided, that is true." Albus began. "I call bullshit," Fred said, standing. His parents looked at him in shock, but his brothers all nodded in agreement. "Ron, George, and I told you what took place the summer after Harry's first year. We told you about having to pull the bars off Harry's window and about how he'd been locked in his room and not fed enough." George stood up and glared at Dumbledore. "And we believed you when you said you'd take care of the problem. But you didn't, did you?" Minerva turned to face the headmaster. "Albus, is this true? Tell me you spoke to those horrible muggles about their behavior. Harry's home life may not have been ideal," Dumbledore began, choosing his words carefully. "But I did my best to ensure that his time at Hogwarts made up for any unpleasantness he may have experienced over the summer." "Oh, right. I'm sure after a summer of dealing with his relatives, a nice fight with the Dark Lord must seem like an amusing vacation," Remus exclaimed, throwing up his hands in frustration, spinning to face the others in the room. He glared at them all. "Harry's faced the Dark Lord 6 times and lived. How many of us can say that? As Harry pointed out to me, we piss ourselves at the mere mention of his name. Oh yes, Hogwarts has been a real safe haven for him, hasn't it?" "He witnessed his godfather's murder some weeks ago," Moody said as he climbed to his feet. "How many of you have checked on him since then?" "Oh, that's right. Albus wouldn't allow it, would he? It's so much better to let a teenager wallow in guilt and grief, isn't it?" Molly's eyes widened as she looked at her husband. "Oh, Merlin, he must have felt so alone." "What have we done?" "Arthur, the same thing we've all done," Minerva said quietly. Turning, she looked at Dumbledore. "All of us?" Pinching the bridge of his nose, Albus sighed wearily. "I agree with most of what has been said here, but we can do nothing to help rectify the situation until we gain access to Harry. We will begin with his friends. I will speak to Ron and Hermione about the situation and what is needed." "They need the truth, Headmaster," Remus told him. "You cannot send them to headquarters unaware of what Harry's been through, or they won't understand his anger. They will be given the information they need to help us deal with the situation," Dumbledore said as he stood up. Moody's eyes narrowed, noting that the old man hadn't actually agreed with Remus. "Let us adjourn for now. I will keep you all updated on our progress," Dumbledore told them as he released the wards on the door. As the Order members exited the hall, Moody held Remus back. "My house, Lupin. We need to talk." Nodding, the werewolf strode from the room. Later, at the Burrow, Dumbledore took a deep breath of the clean air as he walked towards the Quidditch pitch, Ron and Hermione in tow. He'd had a difficult time convincing Molly and Arthur to let him speak to the children alone. Molly was too emotional at the moment and would not have helped the situation. Reaching the pitch, he turned to face the teenagers and cast a silencing charm around them. "I'm sure you're both wondering why I've asked to speak with you. Is it about Harry?" Hermione asked. Dumbledore smiled. "It is indeed, Miss Granger." "Is he all right?" Ron asked worriedly. When the headmaster looked at him curiously, he scowled. "It's not like we've spoken to him since we left the train station. You wouldn't let us." "Ron," Hermione hissed. Dumbledore sighed sadly. "I am afraid Mr. Weasley's anger is justified, Miss Granger. I have recently come to regret my decision to allow Harry his privacy during his time of grief. He should have been amongst friends, or at least been able to contact them via owl post." Hermione's eyes narrowed. "What's happened?" "The Dursleys did not treat him well when he arrived home. Once I'd been informed of the situation, I went to visit Harry and found him to be very angry with me. With some justification, I'll admit, seeing the conditions he was living in with his relatives, I made the decision to move him to headquarters. That should have made him happy. He hates those bloody muggles," Ron muttered. "Headquarters would be the last place he'd want to go, though," Hermione said, watching the headmaster. "There are too many memories of Sirius there." "I didn't think of that," Ron said with a frown. "Neither, in fact, did I. It's true Harry didn't want to go to headquarters, but I'm afraid I forced the issue," Dumbledore said sadly. "Oh," Headmaster Hermione said, shaking her head. "He must be so angry." "Indeed," Dumbledore agreed. "He has, in fact, expressed his displeasure with me by evicting the Order from the house." "But how?" Ron asked, confused. "He must have inherited the house from Sirius," Hermione told him. "Correct, Miss Granger. The Order is not allowed to enter the house, as Harry has ordered Creature to change the wards." Hermione frowned and tried to say something, then shook her head. "The Fidelius charm is still in place, though. I can't say the house address." "Creature was unable to remove it," Dumbledore confirmed. All of the other wards have been changed, however. Wait a minute, Ron said suddenly. Harry kicked you all out, and now he's in the house alone. With Creature. Oh, God! Just like Sirius, Hermione blurted out. That bloody elf could do anything to him, Ron said angrily. Creature has no choice but to obey Harry, Mr. Weasley. He's bound to him now, Dumbledore soothed. That didn't help Sirius, Hermione reminded him. I think we can all agree that Harry is more careful than Sirius was, Dumbledore said lightly. The two teenagers looked at each other. Hermione nibbled on her thumbnail and Ron scowled. But it doesn't really matter. Harry can't be left there alone. I agree. That's why I asked to speak to you both. Harry won't let the order in, but I'm betting he wouldn't turn either of you away, Dumbledore told them seriously. I am hoping that once you've gained entry into the house, you can help Harry. He cannot stay at headquarters alone. Ron snorted. Better there than back with those filthy relatives of his. He's right, Hermione agreed as she stared at the headmaster. As much as I don't like the idea of Harry being alone, he can't go back to the Dursleys. No, he can't. Not until I've straightened things out with them in any case. No, he will be staying here with the Weasleys. The warding around the burrow will be increased and a round-the-clock guard set. What do you think, Hermione? Ron asked. She shrugged. He likes being here, and it's certainly better than leaving him alone. She bit her bottom lip for a moment, then looked up at Dumbledore. But we won't force him, she stated. If he doesn't want to leave headquarters, we will respect his decision. Right, Ron, right. People have been pulling him into their schemes long enough, Ron said, shaking his head. It's about time he makes his own choices. Hermione looked at him approvingly, and Dumbledore smiled. Harry's lucky to have such fiercely loyal friends. He told them both. You're wrong, Headmaster, Hermione told him quietly. We're the lucky ones, even if it has taken some of us longer to realize that, Ron said ruefully. Grimmauld Place, evening. Moody closed the front door quietly, not wanting to disturb the portrait of Mrs. Black. Leaving his house was awkward, and he dropped it to the floor with some relief. His magical eyes spun around wildly as he examined the house for danger. Seeing only the elf in the kitchen and Harry in the library, he sighed. Patting the pockets of his overcoat, he checked to make sure he'd lost none of the other treasures he'd brought the young man. A loud pop sounded through the entrance hall, and Moody looked up, scowling. What do you want? Creature scowled back. Nasty! Half-Blood Master knows you're here. Good! Take that bag into the library. Creature doesn't have to listen to you, the elf hissed. No, but you have to listen to me, Harry said as he walked into the hall. Now, take Mr. Moody's bag into the library, and don't look at or touch anything inside of it. Creature will do as filthy, muggle-loving master commands, he grumbled as he picked up the bag in question. When the elf left, Harry stared at the old man in front of him. I didn't expect to see you so soon. Moody shrugged. We don't have a lot of time, Potter, and some things have happened that you should be made aware of. Library or kitchen? Harry asked. Library. After you, Harry said, waving the older man ahead of him. Moody's eyes gleamed. Smart, Potter? I always knew there was something different about you. As the old man passed him, Harry frowned and rubbed his scar. I'm not talking about that boy, Moody snapped, his eye having seen Harry's actions. Unlike your friends, you don't trust someone simply because he says he's on your side. You're cautious, and that'll serve you well. Harry's expression hardened as they entered the library. A lesson I learned too late for some. And don't call me boy. Spotting the bag the elf had brought into the room and placed on a table, Moody walked toward it, shaking his head. True enough, Potter, but we all make mistakes. The smartest of us learn from them and move on. The dumb ones either wallow in guilt or never learn. Which will you be? I wonder. Unhooking the clasp that sealed the bag, he flipped it open and waved the young man over. These are for you. Joining him at the table, Harry examined the contents of the bag. Inside were many books, some so old and worn they looked as though they'd fall apart if touched. Reaching down, he gently removed one volume from the bag. He turned it over gently in his hands to read the title, Dark Lords, Unstoppable Creatures of Evil or Playground Bullies, then looked up at Moody questioningly. It's an old, out-of-print book, like most of the others in the bag, the old man told him, his eyes spinning lazily in its socket. But you should read it. Most evil men, whether they call themselves a Dark Lord, a general, or a chancellor, thrive on misinformation. Take Voldemort, for example. Most people think he's immortal, unbeatable. He's not. He's human, Potter, with all the limitations and frailties we all have. It's just a matter of finding his weakness and using it against him. What if he doesn't have one? Harry asked. All of us. For you, it's only a matter of educating yourself, training, and finding his before he finds yours. You make it sound so simple, Harry, Moody told him firmly. Living is the hard part. If you're not up for the challenge, tell me before I waste my time on you. I don't want to discover that you don't have the balls to kill the bastard when the time comes. But I don't want to be a murderer, Harry exclaimed, glaring. Is it murder or self-defense, Potter? You know as well as I that Voldemort would kill you in a heartbeat if given the chance. Will you lay down your wand and die at his feet like a dog, or fight to live your life? When Harry only gaped at him, Moody shook his head in disgust. You made a small step in the right direction when you kicked the Order out of this place. Was it all a bluff? Will you go crawling back to Dumbledore and hide behind his robes for protection? Fuck off, Moody, Harry bellowed. You know nothing of my life or what I've been through, so don't lecture me. Oh, I just love angsty, teenage bullshit in the afternoon. And keep your voice down or the hag in the hall will be giving us headaches with her shrieking. Hag in the hall? You mean Mrs. Black? Who else, Potter? Harry started at him for a moment, his eyes wide with disbelief. So much for constant vigilance, he said, choking back his laughter. What are you talking about? Moody growled. You? Harry said, trying not to laugh. You walked in and didn't notice. The great Alastor Moody, the man who takes paranoia to new extremes. Oh, this is too rich. Potter, the old man growled warningly, shaking his head. Harry waved a hand towards the hall. Look for yourself, Moody, scowling. Alastor scanned the entrance hall with his magical eye, then muttered an oath. How? We tried everything. I ordered Creature to remove it, Harry told him, trying to keep his expression serious. And you didn't notice. He bit his lip as he watched the older man mutter to himself. Shotting was the last straw. Sliding into one of the chairs at the table, Harry gave up and laughed out loud. It's not that funny, Moody groused, but it does prove that even I make mistakes. That the next one might be my last. Next one? Harry asked, still grinning. I told you, Potter, we all make mistakes. They're as unavoidable as the dawn. Being constantly vigilant can cut down on how many you make, but you'll still slip. Accept that fact now, and you'll save yourself a lot of heartache in the future. Shaking his head, Harry could only smile at how neatly the man had proven his earlier point. I understand, Professor, and I'll do my best. See that you do, Moody grumbled. Yes, sir, Harry replied. Don't call me that either. It's Alastor, Mad Eye, or Moody. Reaching into the bag, he began to pull out books and stack them on the table. These are just basic books on subjects I felt you might want to familiarize yourself with. They'll make a good foundation for later training. Harry nodded as he scanned the titles. Read them as quickly as you can. Your education has been sorely lacking, and we don't have a lot of time. There are some people I want to talk to about furthering your training, but I wanted to get you started on these first. I'm giving you a few other things as well. Moody continued as he pulled items out of several pockets. The first is a faux glass. While I doubt you'll need it here in the house, you should familiarize yourself with it. When term starts, make sure to take it with you and place it in your dorm room. You think I'll need it at Hogwarts? Harry asked as he examined the object on the table. It looked like a mirror, but didn't reflect anything in the surrounding room. The surface was foggy, but through the mist a figure loomed, too indistinct to make out clearly. Moody snorted. How many times have you run into trouble in that place, and not just with Voldemort? True, Harry coincided. You know how it works? Yes, I think so. It reflects the image of the owner's enemy, or enemies, Moody added. The images will remain blurry and out of focus if your enemy is far away. The more in focus the figure is, the closer they are to you, so watch yourself. Guy! Shouldn't I be watching the mirror? The glare that followed his comment made him grin. Smart ass, Moody grumbled. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to move on. By all means, Harry said, waving a hand airily. Shaking his head, Moody touched another object on the table. "This is a presentation. Pensieve works differently than the Pensieve Dumbledore has in his office. You deposit memories in the bowl the same way, but rather than entering the memory, you tap the Pensieve with your wand 3 times and the memory is displayed, much like a Muggle movie. Type of Pensieve is used to train Aurors, or was until Fudge was elected." "Why would Fudge care how Aurors are trained?" Harry asked curiously. "The Death Eaters own him, Potter, and no Death Eater wants to deal with an effective police force." Malfoy, Harry spat. "Very good. Yes, Lucius Malfoy is Voldemort's mole. He controls Fudge and therefore the Ministry. I went back through the records and was able to pinpoint exactly when Fudge began taking bribes, based solely on department cutbacks. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement was the first to feel the cuts. If it's in the records, why didn't you bring it the attention of the Wizengamot?" "I did," Moody growled. "Took it straight to Dumbledore, in fact." Harry groaned. "I think I can guess what happened." "I'm sure you can," Moody said with a feral smile. "The old man said he'd take care of it. Soon after, the records disappeared, and I was politely asked to retire. I confronted Dumbledore about it, of course. He told me some tale about Fudge threatening him with Ministry interference at Hogwarts if he didn't back down. I didn't believe him at the time, but after last year, I think he might have been telling me the truth." Harry cocked his head, thinking quickly. "You may have a point. Dumbledore does tell the truth occasionally, Potter. The trick is separating out the lies before they bite you on the arse. He's a big picture kind of person. His problem is that he often forgets that the picture he's looking at represents people, not pawns. Don't defend him to me, Moody. I'm not. Albus has his faults, and he's made a lot of mistakes in his life, especially with you. But he's also done a lot of good in this world. You may not ever get along with him again, but don't let your anger blind you. If Albus pulls his head out of his ass in regards to you, he can help you. Just don't close your mind to that possibility, or you'll be limiting yourself out of spite." "So you think I should just forget everything he's done to me and trust him?" Harry asked angrily. "I didn't say anything about trusting or forgetting, Potter. I'm talking about learning. Forget it, Moody. That man has manipulated me for the last time." When Alastor tried to reply, Harry held up one hand. "I'd suggest you change the subject or leave," he growled, shaking his head and grumbling under his breath. Moody sat down across the table from Harry and pulled out his flask. Uncorking it, he drank deeply. "Fine, then." Changing the subject, he corked the flask with a slap and dumped it on the table. "The Order met at Hogwarts today. You can guess what the topic was, I'm sure. Me, and the fact that they have no secure place to meet any longer. Aye, that would be it. Now I could tell you all about it, but I'll save my breath." Reaching out a hand, he smacked the presentation Pensieve with a finger and dragged it toward him. When he pulled his wand, he noted Harry's suddenly stiff posture and nodded to himself. The lad was watching him carefully, and Moody was glad to see it. Lifting his wand to his head, he paused a moment and brought forth the memory of the meeting. Once it was in place, he used his wand to extract it, flicking it into the Pensieve with an ease of long practice. "Activate the Pensieve, Potter. Tap the rim 3 times with your wand," Moody instructed, tucking away his wand. When Harry lifted his hand from below the table, Moody was heartened to discover he already held his wand. The Pensieve rang like a bell each time the rim was struck. As the third bell-like tone rang out, the memory appeared above the bowl and began to play. Once the memory had played itself out, Harry sat back in thought. He was surprised by some of what he heard, though he was glad to hear the Weasley twins tearing into Dumbledore. He didn't understand Remus, though. The last time they'd spoken, he'd defended the headmaster. At the meeting, he'd called the man an idiot. It didn't make sense. "What has you scowling now, Potter?" Moody asked as he replaced the memory and pushed the Pensieve away. "Remus. The last time I spoke to him, he argued Dumbledore's case, or tried to, at any rate. So why the change of heart, Moody?" Harry asked. "He was more than willing to do whatever Dumbledore asked of him. Then suddenly he's calling him an idiot." "He realized he made a mistake," the older man said, shrugging. "He came back to my place after the meeting and helped me choose which books to bring you. He's angry at himself for believing in Dumbledore so completely. He's angry at himself for not watching out for you. He told me you wrote something in a notebook and showed it to him, and that he discussed it with you later." When Harry nodded, Moody sighed. He said he didn't want to believe what you told him. Once you'd evicted the order, however, he started looking at its members with new eyes. Are you saying he believes me now? Aye, and the guilt of ever doubting you is eating at him. He made his choice, Harry bit out. Seems to me he's made a different choice now. When Harry only glared, Moody stood up and sighed. There's a difference between being strong and being hard, Potter. With strength comes resilience. Become too hard, and you'll crack and shatter at the first knock you take. Harry stood up when Moody walked toward the door. Wait! You're leaving now! What about Hermione and Ron? Albus was going to talk to them, but I don't know when. Read those books, Potter. I've got people to talk to, and a few more items I need to find for you. Grimmauld Place, mid-morning. Harry finished washing his breakfast dishes and dried his hands. As he watched the water drain from the sink, he made a mental note to look up common household charms. Since the Ministry couldn't track his use of magic in the house, he could see no reason to continue doing things the hard way. He knew he could order Kreacher to do the cleaning, but he wanted as little contact with the elf as possible. As he walked out of the kitchen, making sure to keep the table between him and the refrigerator, he made a list of the things he wanted to accomplish. He still had several of the books Moody had given him to read. Most of them were small, but contained useful information, and he'd stayed up later than he'd expected reading through them. He also had some of the books he'd pilfered from the library to read yet, but knew they would take some time to get through. As Moody had stressed that time was short and seemed to think the books he'd brought were important, Harry figured he'd finish them first before starting on the others. Making his way to the library, he sat down at the table and pulled a book toward him. He'd started it last night, but hadn't been able to finish it. Finding the piece of parchment he'd used as a bookmark, he opened the book carefully. The pages were brittle and smudged in places, but the information was interesting. Harry was almost certain it was a Muggle volume. But the topic of clearing the mind for meditation and relaxation could be useful in occlumency. It was certainly more informative than anything Snape had ever taught him. Several pages later, a loud popping sound had him raising his head to stare at the scowling house elf beside him. "What?" he asked in annoyance. "Filthy, nasty master has visitors," Kreacher grumbled. "How?" he asked. "No one's allowed in the house." Marking his place, he set his book aside and stood up. "The visitors are on the lawn," the elf told him, grinning maliciously. The Muggle-loving, hairy headmaster did try the door, though. Harry's smile nearly matched the elf's. With the same results, I'm assuming. Kreacher cackled. He left a wonderful furrow in the weeds out front when he landed and skidded to a halt. He danced a small jig, then looked up at Harry with a touch of respect. Kreacher could almost like his new master if he weren't such a filthy, nasty little half-blood. And the less I see of you, the more I think I could actually like you if you weren't a demented, twisted little thing, Harry said, turning away from the elf and walking towards the door. Kreacher scowled for a moment, trying to work that out. Then, seeing that Harry was leaving, he trotted after him. "Kreacher has prepared the upstairs window." For master, he added, puffing slightly as he tried to keep up. "Thank you, Kreacher. Nicely done," Harry complimented as he turned and moved quickly up the staircase. Kreacher frowned. Had his new master just thanked him for doing his duty? Shaking his head, unable to puzzle out the young human, he followed up the stairs, though more slowly. Entering the front bedroom, Harry saw that the old drapes had been pulled back and the window opened. He wasn't sure why Kreacher was being so helpful, but figured it was a puzzle for another time. Just now, he was curious about his visitors. Standing at the corner of the window, he looked down at the front lawn. There, in front of the house, was Dumbledore, looking rather rumpled and annoyed. He still had twigs in his beard and dirt on his robe. Not far from him stood Tonks, frowning at the house, and Moody, who was laughing like a loon at the disgruntled headmaster. Off to the left, looking confused and a bit uncertain, were Ron and Hermione. Behind them stood a very concerned-looking Molly Weasley. "I'm still not sure this is such a good idea, Albus," Molly was saying. She kept glancing at the house, then back at the headmaster. "Be easy, Molly." "Harry won't harm them," Dumbledore said as he brushed at his robe. "Unless they try to harm him," Moody added, squinting at the students. "Why would we want to harm him?" Hermione asked, shocked at the thought. "That would depend on what this fool has filled your minds with," Moody replied, jerking a thumb at Dumbledore. "Alastor, please. You're not helping the situation," Albus said with some heat. Ron shrugged. "He didn't tell us a lot, and I doubt it was the whole truth." Ron, Hermione hissed. Dumbledore looked a bit hurt by the statement, but Moody smiled. Ronald Weasley, you will apologize, Molly demanded. For what? Honestly, Mum, when was the last time any of you told us the whole truth? Oh, you say it's for our own good, and I'm sure you believe that, but being kept in the dark has caused the three of us more trouble than knowing the truth would have. Into the silence that followed, Hermione nodded her head, though reluctantly. I'm sure he didn't mean to sound so disrespectful, but he's right. When Molly began to sputter in outrage, Ron looked at Hermione, a bit surprised that she backed him up. You could have been a bit more diplomatic about it, but I meant what I said. You're right, she told him quietly. Thanks, he said, then turned to Moody. Look, neither of us wants to hurt Harry, but I think we can both understand why he's being cautious. Walking towards the man, he drew his wand and held it out carefully. Take it. I won't need it with Harry. Hermione joined him a moment later and surrendered her wand. We wouldn't hurt him, she told the man quietly. Ignoring the wands, Alastor looked at the house, specifically the upstairs bedroom, and waited. In response to something only he could see, he turned back to the two teens and shook his head. That won't be necessary. Why? Hermione asked. In response, the house shook rather violently, and everyone but Moody took a few steps back in fear. I think you'll find that the house is open to you now, Alastor said quietly, but Harry isn't without his defenses, so don't betray the trust he's just given you. Excellent, Dumbledore exclaimed, walking towards the house. Maybe now we can get this all settled. Just them, you hairy old goat, Harry called, stepping up to the window and finally making himself visible to those on the lawn. Only Ron and Hermione may enter. Now, Harry, Dumbledore began. The window crashed down and the drapes swung closed. Dumbledore sighed and turned back to the teens. Well, then, I guess it's up to you both. Bring him out if you can. We'll do whatever we can to make Harry happy, Hermione said firmly, tucking her wand away. Turning and walking toward the front door, she didn't notice the headmaster's scowl, but Ron did, catching up to walk beside her. He chuckled. I think you managed to annoy him. I'm more concerned about Harry than the headmaster, she muttered. So am I. But let me enjoy the moment, won't you? Ron pleaded as he put his wand in his pocket. Shaking her head, she stopped and reached for the door handle. Let's hope I don't get a face full of dirt and weeds for this. Taking a deep breath, she turned the handle and the door swung open with a squeak. Glancing at Ron, who shrugged, she then straightened her shoulders and walked into the gloomy interior. Ron followed, closing the door behind him. Welcome to the former headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix, a raspy voice said from the top of the stairs. Ron and Hermione both jumped and spun towards the voice. Sorry, Harry said as he walked down the stairs. I couldn't resist. Hermione slapped a hand over her heart and frowned at him. That wasn't nice, Harry. Maybe not, but I won't have been able to resist either, Ron said, grinning. Come on, Hermione, lighten up a bit. He faced Harry and looked him over carefully. Living on your own seems to be good for you. I can't say much about the house, but I could get to like the whole no adults thing. The house has its benefits, Harry said, shrugging, but I'll get into that later. He smiled at Hermione. I'm sorry for scaring you. Prat, she muttered. Then her eyes widened and she looked at the landing. Wait a minute. Where's Mrs. Black's portrait? Harry laughed. You're quicker than Moody. I had to point it out to him. Ron, staring at the now bare wall. It's certainly an improvement. I may have gotten rid of the old harridan, but I've still got an evil house elf to deal with. There's also a rather nasty beast that's taken up residence in my refrigerator. What? Hermione asked, confused. Harry waved away her question. We'll get to that later. What I'd like to know is why you're both here. I have been told that Dumbledore felt being here was too dangerous for you. We're supposed to talk you into coming out of the house and returning it to the Order, Ron said cheerfully. We really need to work on your tact, Ronald, Hermione groused. I don't need tact, Hermione. I need the truth, Harry told her quietly. That is the truth, though I wouldn't have been as blunt about it, she said, still frowning at Ron. Ron rolled his eyes. He's not an idiot, Hermione. We're here for him, not them, he said, nodding toward the front door. Let's just give it to him straight and let him make up his own mind for a change. Hermione sighed, but nodded. Ron would never be a great orator, but he was correct. Looking between the two, Harry shook his head. Mind telling me when you two changed roles? We haven't, Ron said seriously. After our little frolic through the Department of Mysteries, I did a lot of thinking. It wasn't as if I had a choice, really. Those brain things sort of rifled through my memories, but I guess they did me a favor. His eyes met Harry's. I've been a real prat from time to time. We've always managed to work things out, but that doesn't excuse what I've done. I know I've got a lot of hang-ups, being the youngest son, being poor, but that's no reason to take it out on my best friend. Hermione whitened her eyes and blinked. Never tell me that Ronald Weasley has gone and grown up on us. She placed a hand over her heart. I think I might faint from shock. When Ron glared at her, she grinned. Oh, lighten up, Ron. Harry's lips twitched. Don't you hate it when someone throws your words back at you? Yeah, Ron grumbled, still glaring at Hermione. When he turned back to Harry, he shrugged. I just needed to say that. I know that you trust Hermione. She's always been there for you when you needed her. But even after everything I've done, you still trusted me enough to let me into the house. It means a lot, Harry. You and Hermione were always there when I needed you the most, Harry said, looking between them. Although, if we're going for total honesty, I have to admit that when you both tried to give your wands to Moody, it sort of sealed the deal. I'd been debating with myself about letting you in before that. I wasn't sure what Dumbledore had told you, or if I could trust you. Ron winced slightly and rubbed his ear. I think I understand what Hermione was saying about tact now. Brutal honesty has its place, Hermione said. Yeah, I suppose. And with the way things are now, it's probably for the best, Ron added. Harry, what's going on? This whole situation is rather confusing. Raking a hand through his hair, Harry sighed. I know, and I'm not sure how to explain it. Over a cup of tea, preferably, Hermione said, heading for the stairs to the kitchen. I'll be down in a minute. I need to grab something from my bedroom. Oh, and don't open the refrigerator, he called after her. What's wrong with it? Ron asked, puzzled. I'll explain later, Harry replied, walking up the steps. Shrugging, Ron followed Hermione to the kitchen. Walking into the kitchen a few minutes later, Harry found his friends sitting as far away from the refrigerator as possible and staring at it with some alarm. You didn't open it, did you? He asked. No, but it growled at me when I walked by it to make tea, Hermione said, never taking her eyes off the appliance. What's in there? Ron asked. I've no idea. I was looking for something to eat my first morning here and made the mistake of opening the door. I don't know what it is, but it blinked at me. It blinked, Hermione asked, alarmed. Yeah, and whatever it is has more than 2 eyes, Ron shuddered. Why don't you just get rid of it? I was thinking of sending it to Hagrid, but haven't worked out the logistics of it yet, Harry told them as he sat down, taking the chair closest to the door, and placed his notebook on the table. Why not just let Creature take it? Hermione asked, still staring at the refrigerator. I don't want him leaving the house. That's probably a smart idea, but I'm not sure I'd want that elf near me for any length of time, Ron commented. That's one of the things everyone's worried about, Harry, Hermione told him, finally looking at him. The Order is concerned about you being here alone with Creature. He's not so bad, really. I rarely see him. The few times I've told him to do something, he's done it, but only because he has to. He can't leave or speak to anyone outside the house unless I give him orders to do so. Dumbledore was right about that part, at least. He said you be careful with Creature, Hermione said quietly. Actually, Dumbledore said we could all agree that he would be more careful than Sirius, Ron corrected. When he saw Harry's face tighten with anger, he held up a hand. I didn't say either of us agreed with him, though. Blunt honesty, Harry, remember? Ron's right, Hermione added. It's probably the best way to work through this. Ron and I have no idea what's happened. Dumbledore told us we weren't allowed to contact you this summer. Then, yesterday, he showed up at the Burrow and told us that you'd kicked the Order out of the house and wouldn't allow any of them back in. He hoped you'd let the 2 of us in and that we'd be able to talk you out. Ron and I made it perfectly clear that we wouldn't force you to do anything and that the choice had to be yours. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't want to leave. A summer without adults ordering one about sounds like a fine thing to me, Ron added. Ron, Hermione exclaimed. Would you stop that? Ron asked, glaring at her. Look, I don't know what's going on any more than you do. Harry will either tell us or he won't. But even you have to admit that being here, with no relatives to starve him or treat him like a dog, no Order members about to pull his strings and make him dance to a tune he can't even hear, has got to be an improvement. With the house under the Fidelius charm, it's the safest place he could possibly be. Hermione crossed her arms over her chest and glared at him. I agree with most of what you said, but there are still problems that need to be dealt with, Ron asked, leaning toward her. Food, for one, Hermione replied. The minute he steps out of the house, the Order will grab him. Ron shrugged. He can send Creature. Would you eat anything that Elf brought back? She snapped. Ron sagged on his chair. You've got a point, he muttered. Are you two finished? Harry asked, amused. What? Ron asked. Oh, sorry. Forgot you were there. Thanks, Harry said, rolling his eyes. Yes, Hermione, I know there are still some problems that I need to work out, but food isn't one of them. And yes, I'll get around to that too, he added when she tried to interrupt. Then he slid his notebook down the table to them. To start, read that. Most of the early pages you can just skim through. You both know all that. It's the last part of the notebook that will help explain things, I think. What is this? Hermione asked, opening it. My life story. When they both looked at him oddly, he sighed. Just read it, please. Great, my best friend's giving me homework now, Ron muttered as he moved his chair closer to Hermione's so he could read along with her. I'll be in the library when you're done, Harry told them as he stood up. Hermione, turning a page, didn't reply. Ron grunted and waved a hand at him as he read over Hermione's shoulder. Walking out of the kitchen, he almost smiled. Hermione's rudeness didn't surprise him much. Give her a book, any book, and it was impossible to get anything coherent out of her until she'd finished it. Returning to the library, he sat down at the table and opened the book he'd been reading earlier. If he was lucky, he might be able to get through the current chapter before his friends finished. He was jolted out of his book sometime later when several loud shrieks, followed by a bellow, echoed through the house. Jumping to his feet, he drew his wand, then nearly blasted Creature to smithereens when the elf popped in, grinning horribly. Don't do that! Harry yelled, staring at the elf. And what's with all the shouting? Creature scowled up at him. I don't know what Nasty Master is shouting about, but Master's friends opened the refrigerator. Oh, God, are they hurt? He asked, rushing toward the door. No, Creature said, his disappointment obvious, but maybe next time. Stepping out the door, Harry was nearly run over by Ron. Harry! Ron exclaimed as he jumped back and crashed into Hermione. When Hermione hit the floor, Harry shoved Ron out of his way and went to check on her. Are you all right? I'm fine, she said, glaring at Ron. Sorry, Ron mumbled, looking sheepish. I didn't know you were behind me. Did you expect me to stay in the kitchen? She asked in disbelief. I don't know what I expected, he said, throwing his hands in the air. With all the growling, screaming, and hairy tentacles, I just wanted to get out of there. Standing with Harry's help, she crossed her arms and tapped a foot. You were the one doing all the screaming. Yeah, well, you would have screamed too if you'd seen it, Ron mumbled. And the bellow? Harry asked. That was me. I was telling the red-headed genius to close the refrigerator door before the thing crawled out, Hermione said. Blushing furiously, Ron looked at his feet. Merlin, maybe we have switched roles. What are you blathering about? Hermione asked. Think about it. There I am, screaming like a girl, trying to get away from the thing, while you pick up a chair to bash it if it gets out. This is pathetic. I'll never hear the end of it if my brothers find out. I won't tell them, Ron. If you get your homework done sometime this month, Hermione said. The smile she shot him was all teeth. Blackmail, Ron said, his eyes wide. You've been taking lessons from Fred and George. When Hermione scowled, Harry stopped her before she could reply. Why didn't you just use your wands? Are you daft? We can't use magic, Ron exclaimed. We'd be expelled, Hermione added. The Ministry can't track the use of magic in this house, Harry told them, shaking his head. Ron's jaw dropped and Hermione's eyes widened. Well, why didn't you tell us that? Ron finally asked him. It hadn't come up yet. Why? Growling with frustration, Hermione pushed past them and went into the library. It must be the Fidelius. Following her, Harry shrugged. That's what I assumed. You still could have told us, Ron muttered. I would have gotten around to it. Besides, I told you not to open the refrigerator. I forgot. I was going to grab a few butterbeers before we came up, Ron told him. Wait a minute. If you can use magic, why haven't you gotten rid of that thing? I told you I want to give it to Hagrid. Oh, right. If you two are finished, Hermione asked, holding up the notebook she'd managed to grab before scrambling out of the kitchen. There are some things we should talk about. Sitting down at the table, Harry slid a bookmark into place and closed the book he'd been reading. Leaning back on his chair, he looked at his friends and waited. You were right, Hermione told him as she sat down across from him. We know most of what you've written. She placed the notebook on the table in front of her. But we're seeing it from a new perspective now. This is going to sound bad, and I don't want to hurt you, Harry, but I never stopped to think about this from your angle. Ron and I were with you through most of it, but it was all aimed at you, not us. I think it allowed us to distance ourselves from most of it, Ron added, taking a seat next to Harry. But in doing so, it also made it harder for us to understand just what was happening to you. Those brain things really did a number on you, didn't they? Harry asked, a bit surprised. What's that supposed to mean? Ron yelped. Sorry, it's just that you've never been this perceptive before, Harry replied. He's right, Hermione said, turning to Ron. Gee, thanks for the support, Ron groused. Honesty, Ron. Remember? She asked. Fine. So I wasn't just a prat, but an ignorant prat. Now, can we get back to the topic at hand, please? He asked, feeling put out. You're not ignorant, Ron. I still can't beat you at chess, Harry told him. He grinned. Yeah, that's true. Now that the ego's been stroked, may we continue? Hermione asked. Right, sorry, Harry said. What did you want to know? As I said, we know most of this. But the stuff you wrote about this summer is new. Harry, I don't want to anger you, but I have to ask this. Could you have exaggerated what happened? No, Harry replied firmly. Are you sure? I know when I'm angry, I sometimes. This will go a lot faster if you see it for yourself, Harry told her, reaching across a stack of books. He grabbed the pensive Moody had given him. Seeing the bowl-like object, Ron's eyes widened. Where did you get that? Moody gave it to me, Harry said. It's a presentation pensieve, something the Aurors used to use. Are you sure you know how to use it? Hermione asked, concerned. Not bothering to answer, Harry found the memories he was looking for and deposited them, one by one, into the bowl. When he was done, he tapped it 3 times and nearly smiled when Hermione cocked her head at the ringing sound the pensieve made with each tap. Whoa! Ron exclaimed as the memories were displayed above the bowl. The 3 were silent as the memories played themselves out. While Harry took possession of his memories once more, Ron and Hermione looked at each other, not sure what to think. And these are the people who are supposed to lead us through the war, Hermione muttered. But Fred, George and I told Dumbledore about how your relatives were treating you at the beginning of 2nd year, Ron exclaimed, his face red with anger. He told us he'd take care of it, Harry snorted. He lied, Ron. Seeing Hermione's shocked expression, he leaned forward. What? You think Dumbledore isn't capable of lying to achieve his goals? What goal could he possibly achieve by allowing you to be treated like that? Hermione asked, furious. Harry held out both hands, palms up, and shrugged. I don't know. I only know that at the end of 5th year, after telling me the prophecy, he said he knew what he was condemning me to when he placed me with my relatives. He knew what I went back to each summer, and still insisted that you had to be there, Ron added. Because of the blood wards? Hermione asked, chewing on her knuckle. For the first 10 years. Yeah, I could buy that. Maybe, but after he started Hogwarts. There was no reason for it, Ron told her. It was the safest place for him, Hermione said. Not really, Ron said, thinking quickly. Strategically, headquarters would have been the safest place. The Dursleys' house isn't hidden. Voldemort could have found him there. He might not have been able to breach the wards, true, but any time Harry left the house, Death Eaters could have grabbed him. God, he's right, Hermione whispered, horrified at the implications. Ron turned to Harry, shaking his head. This doesn't make any sense. Dumbledore had to know how vulnerable you were there, unless he's a complete idiot. But if he knows, why does he keep sending me back? Ron looked at Hermione a bit helplessly. You got anything? Only that Dumbledore isn't an idiot, she said. Seeing Harry scowl at her, she clarified. I'm not defending him, but it's the truth. He's an intelligent man, which means something else is going on, something we haven't been able to puzzle out. Whatever it is can't be good, Ron muttered. Not for Harry, at any rate. So what do we do? Hermione asked, looking at her best friends. I don't know what you 2 plan on doing, but I'm not going to do anything, Harry said firmly. When his friends began to protest, he smiled and raised his voice so he could be heard. I'm not going to do anything Dumbledore or anyone else wants me to do. If I could figure out a way of not going to Hogwarts, I'd stay here and let Dumbledore rot. That's easy enough to solve, Ron said helpfully. Step beyond the Fidelius charm and use your wand. No! Harry, you can't neglect your education, Hermione protested vehemently. Harry rolled his eyes. I wouldn't. We both know tutors are available and I could hire them easily enough. Besides, Ron's idea is no guarantee. Dumbledore could smooth things over quick enough at the Ministry. He's done it before, after all. I didn't think of that, Ron said, scrubbing a hand across his eyes. I suppose you could attack Snape. I already did that, Harry said, grinning. What? Hermione asked, aghast. And I missed it, Harry. You need to play that memory for us, Ron exclaimed, his eyes dancing. Watching Hermione, Harry shook his head. Maybe later, Ron, he muttered quietly. I heard that, Hermione snapped. We're getting a little off track, I think, Harry said quickly, hoping to distract Hermione's pending lecture. Dumbledore brought you both here to talk me out of the house. It isn't going to work. There's nothing either of you could say that would convince me that I'm better off somewhere else. He wants you to spend the rest of the summer at the Burrow, Hermione told him. I like the Burrow, Harry admitted, but it puts the Weasleys in danger and I won't do that. Besides, I like being here. I can do what I want. We're always in danger, mate, Ron said seriously. Because of your friendship with me, Harry said bitterly. Don't flatter yourself, Ron laughed. Sure, that might add a bit to it, but my parents haven't exactly been the torchbearers for pure blood rights. Dad's fascination with and protection of Muggles marked our family as traitors long before you entered the picture. Sorry, Ron, I hadn't thought of that, Harry said sheepishly. Look, leaving the house puts me back under Dumbledore's control. You've read through my notebook and seen the memories, so you should understand just what that will mean. Hermione shoved away from the table and stood up. I still can't believe what the headmaster's done to you, she ranted. All this time, I thought he was looking out for you, trying to keep you safe. She spun to face him. Dumbledore knows what you've been through. Has he said anything to you about why he continues to allow such abuse? Only that he's trying to keep me safe, Harry said, shaking his head. I would have thought the Dementors would have been enough proof that even with the Blood Wards, the Dursleys' house isn't the safe haven he thinks it is. Yeah, but you weren't in the house when they attacked, Ron pointed out. True, but your father hooked up the floor to the house, remember? What's to stop someone else from doing it? We know there are Death Eaters working at the Ministry, Harry said, frowning. But Lucius Malfoy's in Azkaban, Hermione reminded him. Not for long, Ron muttered angrily. Dad's heard things. There are rumors that those caught in the Department of Mysteries will be pardoned soon and released. Hermione paled and traced the scar Dolohuv's attack had left her with. Can't Dumbledore block their release? She asked. Dunno, Ron said, shrugging. Dad told him about the rumors, but Dumbledore doesn't seem concerned over it. Harry laughed bitterly. The old man will fight to keep me under his thumb, but won't raise a finger to keep a group of Death Eaters in prison. Hermione rubbed a hand over her face. This just keeps getting worse and worse. Even if they get out, Harry's safe here at headquarters. And even if he did go back to the Dursleys, there's still the Blood Wards. The wards are rubbish, Harry told them. Oh, they'll keep Voldemort out, but there's nothing to keep his Death Eaters from walking in. Harry, you can't know that, Hermione protested. Sure I can. Every time Dumbledore's mentioned those wards, he's stressed that they'll keep Voldemort from entering. He's never said anything about Death Eaters. The only reason they haven't attacked is because they don't know where the house is. When Hermione tried to protest, Harry waved her to silence. Even if I've got that part wrong, and I don't think I have, there's nothing to stop a few Death Eaters from sealing the house and torching it with us inside. I may not be very fond of my relatives, but I don't want them killed because of me. Maybe it was something Dumbledore overlooked when he set the wards, Hermione asked, beginning to pace. I find that hard to believe. Even if it was, there are enough people who know about the wards, Hermione. You can't tell me they've all overlooked something this obvious, Ron said. My parents know about them. Those on guard duty outside the house know about them. Someone should have figured this out by now. Let me get this straight, Hermione said, as she passed a bookshelf and circled the couch. Dumbledore knows about Harry's treatment at the Dursleys, yet lets it continue, citing the protection of the Blood Wards as a reason. The Blood Wards are designed to keep Voldemort out, but not his Death Eaters. Ron, who'd been watching Hermione pace, quickly closed his eyes as his head began to spin. Sounds about right. Don't forget Snape and his occlumency lessons, Harry added. I'd like to, Ron muttered. What about him? Hermione asked. Dumbledore's the one who instructed Snape to teach me occlumency. You both know how those lessons went. I complained to Dumbledore about them, but he insisted that Snape was the only one who could teach me and made me continue. Those lessons only served to open my mind to Voldemort, not close it, and you both know where that led. blood-brain creatures and a dead godfather, Ron muttered tactlessly, causing Harry to wince. After glaring at Ron for a moment, Hermione looked at Harry. It sounds like some grand conspiracy theory. Harry widened his eyes in mock shock. Maybe it was all caused by UFOs, Harry, Hermione protested. What's a UFO? Ron asked, his brow crinkled in puzzlement. Later, Hermione said, waving away his question. Look, I'm not proposing a conspiracy. I'm simply laying out the facts I have. They might be connected, they might not. There are too many things that don't make sense, and I can't pass them all off as coincidence. When Hermione tilted her head and waited for him to continue, Harry rolled his eyes. All right, let's start with the Dursleys. Dumbledore knew how they were treating me and did nothing. He said he couldn't remove me because of the Blood Wards, but we'll get back to that in a second. Even if the Blood Wards don't have the flaws, I think they do. What was to stop him from having a little talk with my relatives? He forced them to take me in. He could have forced them to treat me better, but didn't. On to the Blood Wards, so they can keep Voldemort out, but Dumbledore said nothing about Death Eaters. The house was hooked up to the floor network once. It could be hooked up again. Even disregarding that, we know people can port key in and out. Order members have done it. So have I, for that matter. People can also apparate into the house, assuming they know where it is. And that seems to be the key to the Blood Wards, at least part of it. Voldemort can't cross the wards, but his Death Eaters can if they find it. Harry shrugged. It's nice of the headmaster to keep Voldemort out, but apparently it's okay for his minions to drag me out to him. There's a thought to keep you awake at night, Ron muttered. I could write a book on it, Harry told him. You both know about Snape and his occlumency lessons. He's a marked Death Eater, supposedly a spy for Dumbledore. We've been told over and over that Voldemort is the most powerful Dark Lord ever. He's also said to be the most powerful wizard in the world. How do you suppose Snape's able to keep secrets from him? You think Voldemort knows everything Snape knows? Hermione asked, her eyes wide. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I don't think the bastard's as trustworthy as Dumbledore thinks he is, Harry told her. I know I've never trusted him, Ron said. Great greasy bat. Do I really need to go into the specifics of our time at Hogwarts? Harry asked. The stone and the fact that 3 first years could find it. The chamber no one but I could find. My name in the Goblet of Fire, Cedric's death and a Death Eater posing as a professor. Umbridge, and the fact that she sent Dementors after me before she ever met me. The disaster at the Department of Mysteries and Sirius's death. Shaking his head, Harry stared at Hermione for a moment. I'm not saying there's a conspiracy, just that Dumbledore's protection hasn't amounted to much. He's right, Hermione, Ron said quietly. Every time he's gotten into a jam, he's gotten himself out. Usually with the help of my 2 best friends, Harry added. Ron grinned. Yeah, true. So what's the bottom line here, Harry? What are you saying? Hermione asked as she sat back down at the table. I'm saying no, Harry told her simply. No to Dumbledore's protection. No to the Order of the Phoenix. Hogwarts is a fine school if one wants to learn how to brew potions, grow magical plants, or turn matchsticks into needles. Unfortunately, I don't want any of that. I just want to live, Hermione, and no one at Hogwarts seems able or willing to teach me how to survive Voldemort. Ron scowled down at his shoes. However much he might have wanted to dispute what Harry said, he couldn't. Hermione covered her face with both hands for a moment, then lowered them to look at Harry. So you're not going back? I don't think I have a choice in that. Dumbledore will make sure I have no choice, Harry told her. I'm simply refusing to participate. They might be able to force me to go to class, but they can't make me do anything other than attend, she asked him. Until Dumbledore removes his head from his ass. Ron grinned. Can't see that happening any time soon. Harry ignored him. I know how important an education is, Hermione, but what good will it do me if I'm dead? He asked her quietly. Passive resistance, she muttered, staring at him. What? Harry asked, confused. It's a form of non-violent protest, she explained. Gandhi and Martin Luther King, Jr. were among the most famous advocates of passive resistance. People would gather in public buildings, sit down and refuse to move when ordered to do so. They were often arrested for civil disobedience, but when you're dealing with thousands of protesters, it's a real strain on law enforcement. That's just one example. Basically, it's trying to force a change in policy or opinion by non-violent means. In other words, saying no, as you put it, Ron's eyes narrowed. This could be interesting. Does it work? Hermione shrugged. Sometimes, but I don't think it would work well with just one person. I'll help, the redhead offered. Anything that gets me out of classes and homework can't be bad. Ron, this isn't a joke. Hermione fumed. Oh, lighten up. I know it's not a joke, and I was serious about helping. Dumbledore's way hasn't worked. I say it's time for Harry to do things his way. Why wouldn't this work? Even with 2 people or 3, if I joined you, it's just not enough people to make a big enough impression. Hermione's eyes widened. But if we told people what we were planning, she began. Ah, Hermione, Harry said, growing alarmed. We could start with Gryffindor. I know a lot of them would help. We could get the DA involved too. If they knew what Harry had gone through, they'd back him up, and that might bring in Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff as well. Hermione, it's a nice idea, Harry tried again. We could start with Ginny, she continued, growing more enthusiastic. She'd be able to get most of the other Gryffindor 6th years to the Burrow to explain what's happening. We could send her a copy of Harry's notebook, so they could read it themselves, Harry yelled, causing the witch to jump and glare at him. What? Harry, this could work, she protested. Maybe, but you're overlooking something. I'd really rather not have my personal life paraded through the school. Thank you. Ron shook his head. I don't mean to sound harsh, Harry, but if airing your personal life to the school results in Dumbledore actually listening to you, isn't it worth it? Harry scowled at him. Easy to say when it's not you being embarrassed. But listen, if it works, this idea will disrupt the whole school, and the headmaster will have no choice but to at least hear you out. So it's embarrassing. Voldemort's killed too many people to count. How many people have died of embarrassment? Ron asked. He's right, Harry, Hermione said quietly. You're only saying that because you see this as some nifty new project, Harry told her bitterly. Yes, keeping my best friend alive, which is what he said he wanted, she snapped. It was your idea in the first place, not to bring the whole bloody school into it, Harry shouted. It's the best chance you have to make this work, she told him firmly. Dumbledore's been ignoring your complaints for years, Harry. What makes you think he'll change his mind? He might just decide to wait you out, figuring you'll grow tired of it. I won't, Harry muttered. And what will you do if Dumbledore figures that out too late? Will you sit at the Dark Lord's feet and refuse to move? Will you stare down his wand and refuse to die when he casts the killing curse on you? Hermione asked, her eyes boring into his. When he turned away from her, she reached across the table and grabbed his hand. Harry, if you go back to Hogwarts and do this on your own, you'll turn the whole school against you, starting with Gryffindor. They won't understand why you're doing it. All they'll see is that Professor Snape was right. To them, you'd be a spoiled, petulant child, doing his best to lose them. House Cup! Do you think I care? Harry asked, jerking his hand away. You will, once the house turns against you, Ron told him, and don't try to deny it either. You see yourself going up against Dumbledore and the Order, Hermione said earnestly. But the fact is, if you do this, you'll be going up against the whole school. Oh, sure! It might be funny at first, but eventually the other students are going to grow resentful unless they understand why you're doing it. You're assuming they'll all support me. You know as well as I do that they'll turn on me at the drop of a hat, Harry growled. They've done it before. You're right, they have, Hermione agreed. But if you think back on those incidences, you'll realize that they didn't have all the information. They didn't know the truth. And if you do this your way, Ron added, you'll go through it again. Look, mate, Hermione and I will support you, either way. But if you want this to work, you'll need more help than... The loud pop of Creature's appearance in the library made all 3 jump. Will Nasty Master be leaving the people on the lawn? The elf asked, scowling first at Ron, then Hermione. Ron's eyes widened. I forgot about them. So did I, Hermione replied, chewing on her bottom lip. What should we tell them? Whatever you want. I'm not leaving, Harry told them. Yes, Harry, Hermione said, rolling her eyes. Believe it or not, we figured that part out already. When he shot her a glare, she shook her head. Don't go petulant on me. I think you're right to stay here. You can't go back to the Dursleys' house, and going to the Burrow would only have Dumbledore watching your every move and pulling your chain, Ron muttered. No matter what Dumbledore says, you're safer here than anywhere else, Hermione continued. I'm just a little nervous about his reaction when we come out without you. He seemed to think we agreed with him and would be able to talk you out. Mum's never going to let me hear the end of it, Ron moaned. So why not stay here? Harry asked, looking between the two. What? Hermione exclaimed. We can't live here for the summer. Why? You just pointed out how safe it is, Harry told her. Besides, if you're going to plan a revolt at Hogwarts, you might need my input. You'll do it, Hermione exclaimed, jumping to her feet. Yeah, it's not like I have a lot of choice, is it? He mumbled. Then his eyes grew sly. They were all worried about me being left alone in the house with only a demented, evil house elf for company. Seeing the elf staring at him with narrowed eyes, he almost winced. Really, creature? The elf shrugged. Creature is what you say. Then he grinned maliciously. But then Nasty Master isn't as nice as everyone thinks. Shaking his head, Harry turned back to his friends. Anyway, as I was saying, if the two of you stayed here with me, that rather neatly takes care of one of their concerns, doesn't it? Ron laughed. Maybe the hat should have put you in Slytherin. Not that there was any doubt, but I'm in. A summer of no adults ordering me around, no siblings to worry about, and a mutiny to plan. Sounds grand to me. Both young men turned to stare at Hermione. Well, Ron asked, it would make the planning a lot easier, but my parents think I'm spending the summer at the Burrow, she told them. Hedwig's upstairs. Send them a note, Harry told her. And tell them what? She asked, throwing her hands up in frustration. Turning away, she began to pace again, and Ron, learning from past experience, closed his eyes. Let's see. Dear Mum and Dad, I'm no longer at the Burrow. I'm in a home I can't give you the address to because it's hidden and I'm living with two boys. You remember Ron and Harry, don't you? My best friends. We're planning to overthrow the Hogwarts headmaster and make sure Harry lives through his fight with Voldemort. I don't really have time to explain the fact that the wizarding world is at war and there's a good chance I'll be in some danger. But don't worry. I'm sure everything will work out fine. Love from Hermione. Oh, yes, that should work perfectly. She stopped pacing and frowned at them both. Would you two stop grinning? Ron looked at Harry, his lips twitching. I don't know. The letter sounded about right to me. Harry shrugged. This isn't something you put in a letter, she said, stamping her foot in vexation. This isn't brain surgery, Hermione, Harry said, resisting the urge to roll his eyes, knowing it would only set her off again. Explain it to them in person. You've spoken about your parents before. They sound like reasonable people. Besides, they should know about what's going on in the magical world. As much as I hate it, you're a target because you're friends with me. That means your parents are too. They should be made aware of the dangers. It's not a bad idea, she said, thinking. Yeah, it might work. But how does she get back? Ron asked. Mad-Eye Moody. Why would he want to help us? Ron asked. He's a member of the Order. I don't know that he will, but he's helping me. Maybe if I fill him in on the plan, he'll be willing to bring Hermione back, Harry said. I'm not sure I like this, Hermione mumbled. Dumbledore's not going to be pleased, especially if I leave without you and Ron. Pretend to be furious when you go out, Ron suggested. Be angry, Hermione. Ron's a bit too good at that. Thanks, she growled. Harry grinned and nodded at Ron sagely. It's true. Hermione, in full rant mode, is frightening. She'll have Dumbledore shaking in his pointed boots. Fine, I'll try it your way, Hermione told them. But I'm not sure I like the idea of leaving without having a way of getting back. Creature could retrieve the filthy little mudblood, the house elf suggested, then looked horrified that he'd done so. Thanks, Creature, Harry said quietly as he stood up. Oh, if you ever call her a mudblood again, I'll rip your ears off and stuff them down your throat. Do you understand me? Creature grabbed his ears and nodded vigorously. Why not just order him not to call her that? Ron asked, staring at Harry in astonishment. Nasty Master just did, Creature mumbled, still holding his ears. Hermione hugged Harry. Thanks, she whispered. He patted her on the back clumsily. You're welcome. Pulling away, she turned and hugged Ron. Your mum's going to be furious. Expect a few howlers, she told him. Ah, right, Ron mumbled, his face flaming as he squirmed in her embrace. Drawing away, she smiled at them. Well, time to see what sort of actress I am. With any luck, I'll see you both in a few days. Ron and I will be watching from the upstairs window, though you won't be able to see us, Harry told her as they walked out of the library. Be careful, Hermione. Remember, you're furious with us, Ron added. I'll give you two a few moments to get upstairs before I go out, she told them. Reaching the front door, she turned and smiled at them. Once you're gone, I'll open the door. Don't mind the yelling. Ron asked as he started up the stairs. "I've got to make it look good, don't I?" she asked. "Don't overplay it," Harry cautioned. "Trust me," she replied. "I hate it when people say that," Harry grumbled from the top of the stairs. When Ron started toward the back of the house, he rolled his eyes. "No, the front bedroom. This house always gets me turned around," Ron complained. "I really don't think it's the house's fault," Harry said. "What's that supposed to mean?" Hermione shook her head as her friends disappeared. Taking a deep breath, she plastered a furious scowl on her face, turned and jerked the door open. "I can't believe you two," she shouted over her shoulder. "The headmaster is only looking out for Harry's safety. If you two can't see that, then there's nothing more to say." Slamming the door closed, she walked quickly out to the lawn, her steps radiating anger. She muttered under her breath and clenched her fists at her side. "Miss Granger, Dumbledore asked as she drew closer. What's happened?" She looked up at the man she'd once respected and nearly growled. "Harry won't come out, and Ron's decided he'd rather have a summer with no parental supervision than go back to the burrow," she exclaimed. "I tried to tell them that it's not safe to stay here, but they wouldn't listen to me." "Oh, Merlin!" Did she have to say that? Ron groaned as he peeked out the upstairs window. "She's right." "You'll be getting howlers for sure," Harry said, laughing. "Yeah, now that's—" "She's painted it in the worst possible light," the redhead grumbled. Harry waved him to silence. "Be quiet, Ron." "I can't hear what she's saying." It's no use, Hermione's rant continued, "of me saying that I cared more for my prefect badge than I did about them." Ronald Weasley. Molly bellowed. "You get out here this instant." "It's no use, Mrs. Weasley." "They can't hear you," Hermione told her bitterly. They were down in the kitchen, stuffing their faces. Then she looked at Dumbledore. "I'm sorry, Headmaster. I tried. I really did, but they just wouldn't listen." Turning her back to them, she covered her face with her hands. Using the index finger of each hand, she jabbed herself in both eyes several times. When they began to water, she spun back around and bit her lip. "I want to go home," she wailed. "I want my parents." Then, seeming to weep broken-heartedly, she threw herself into Mrs. Weasley's arms. Molly looked at Dumbledore helplessly. "Albus, I can't leave," she began. "Here, I'll take her," Moody growled. "Give the girl to me, and I'll see her home." Gently, Alastor, Dumbledore cautioned. He untangled Hermione's arms from around Molly's neck and escorted her to Moody. "It's all right, Miss Granger. I'm sure you did the best you could. But they're both in there, alone with Creature." Hermione hiccuped. There. Dumbledore soothed as he passed the young woman over to Moody. "I have another plan that might work." "Oh, I hope so," she said, sniffling. "Take her home, Alastor," Dumbledore said. Nodding, Moody wrapped her hand around Hermione's upper arm and disappeared with a loud cracking sound. "What do we do now, Albus?" "My son's in there!" Molly exclaimed. "As I said, I have another plan. However, standing out here isn't going to accomplish anything. Go home, Molly." "I'll contact you as soon as I have more information." Mrs. Weasley looked longingly at the house once more, then apparated away. Dumbledore stood on the lawn for a few moments, staring at the house. Then, with a sad shake of his head, Harry and Ron looked at each other for a moment, both a bit stunned. "I never knew Hermione could act," Harry muttered. "Author's notes, mental note, never offer cookies for reviews. It took me all night to bake those damn things. Okay, here's the deal. If you have a burning question that you absolutely need an answer to, head on over to our Yahoo group and ask it there. I don't want to clutter the notes with review responses unless a bunch of you ask the same question, or I feel the need to torture one of you, or a few of you. A bit of information for all of you. Write more." Reviewers, I'm not going to write any more of this story for one simple reason. It's already complete. And for your next question, there are 9 chapters total. Once again, I'm not following canon here, so live with it. Me that I shouldn't invite people to bite me, as I did in the previous Anne. But I would like to remind any of you budding bitters, vampires, werewolves out there to remember who you're dealing with. Bite me, and I'll yank out every single one of your teeth, using nothing but a spork. Oh, one last thing. There is no ship Don't ask, don't suggest. It's done and I won't change it. Note from Bob. If you're sick of the idiotic icons at the top of the screen and you're using Firefox, get AdBlock plus admin and block the images. It still puts the annoying share in the main text field, but at least you don't have to look at those icons anymore.